all that. Right now, we have the survey in SurveyMonkey. That's the link that you all have seen. I just this morning heard that we've got it in Qualtrics, and we were tweaking a couple little things with the paths there, but this afternoon probably I'll be sending out a link if you want to see what it'll look like in Qualtrics. It's the same survey. There's a few things that are a little bit different just because of the way the skip logic works differently in SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics, but that's the only real difference. So whatever changes we make based on this feedback will go in the SurveyMonkey version and probably at a later time in the Qualtrics version, because there's somebody else who's actually doing that entry, not me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the, see if I can find it. Sorry, my computer is a little wonky on stuff, and I'm going to see if I can figure out where it went. There we go. And see if it's going to let me do this. Okay, enable editing. Got it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Okay. All right. So I am not going to be able to see you. So when you have a comment, just holler, please. Okay. Right. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through this just for clarification. The text that's in red is the reply that I made. What came in black is what we received from the folks who made the comments. So the first one is, the first question was if you would like to expand on any of your answers from the previous question. So the respondent 2 said that it was repetitive and confusing because questions are not on the same page. And what I think they're referring to there is that we say, have you experienced any of these things that are sexual harassment? And then because of the skip pattern, we have to skip you to another, you have to click through to another page to see the where, when, and who questions. So there's nothing we can really do about that. So the other question I think was, the other suggestion is, can we ask about all the terrible things that happen to people and then go back and ask the follow-up questions? I think it's easier for folks to think about, okay, did any of these terrible things happen to you? You said that something terrible had happened to you, where, when, what? Okay, now we're going to ask about a different kind of terrible thing that happened to you. Can you think about those terrible things? Okay, now we're going to ask you where, when, what, or what, where, when, who. So I think that that's actually easier because that way you only have to keep one terrible thing that happened to you in your brain at a time. You don't have to be kind of mentally flipping back and forth between the terrible things and answering all the questions about when, where, and who. Does that make sense to folks?
Rowan, this is Kelly.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. I wonder, though, that because they go through a series of questions and they don't know what the subsequent questions are, as they elaborate on the first one that they encounter, they may not be anticipating that they will be talking about other things. And so they will talk about them in their answer, wanting to share them. And then they'll come back to the question and discover, oh, wait, now they're asking me about this, even though I just talked about it before in anticipation that maybe they weren't going to ask about it. I don't know what the right resolution here is yet, but I think that's also to be considered, right? So I don't know if there's a way to put an additional instruction in there that sort of previews what all the specific topics will be so that people know that we're coming back to them or something. But that's not disagreeing with the logic that's presented, just offering that's a competing logic, both of which I think are quite real.
Yeah, I think, it's a little tricky because we're asking them about very specific things. If someone made comments to you about your sexuality that made you feel unwelcome or, upset, right? And we're asking that. And they might think, well, actually, they didn't make comments about my sexuality, but they did grope me. And so they might want to put that in there. We don't really give them room to do that in there, though. We ask the questions about who, or, when, where, and who are pretty specific to those particular items. Martina?
Yeah, Rona, I recall you and I talking about this for one of the questions during one of our drafting sessions, where we included some kind of language that was like, you will be asked about X, Y, and Z next. I can't remember what it was. It may have been the section where it was like, did you tell any employees or staff of the school, or did you tell anybody else? And we had that explanation at some point. Right. I wonder if there's a way to cue that. That's like, we're going to ask, please note, we'll ask about other forms of contact in our next questions or something like that, just to kind of clue them in. Unless we already do that.
We already kind of do that. I'm not looking at I didn't bring the survey up originally. Let me see if I can get into it from here so we can take a look at it. And okay, let's see. I'm going to try and bring the survey up real quick, and I'm trying to bring it up within SurveyMonkey so that we don't have to try to page through it, because it's kind of a pain in the butt. Sorry, oh, good. Oh, I cannot do that from this computer, I don't think. Shoot. Let me try. Sorry, folks, I should have been prepared for this.
Rowan, this is Lisa Logan. I have it open in the Word document from 328. So if there's anything you want me to read out, I can.
That actually makes sense, is to maybe just open this. I was trying to do it from from SurveyMonkey, but yeah, I can just open the draft too. So let me go ahead, and that way I can share that too, Lisa. Thank you, so that people can look at it. If that's helpful. Let me see if I can get that open. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see, you're seeing a different window. Let me get back to you. It doesn't let me I don't know how to just flip between two windows. So, okay. All right. So now we're looking at the survey. So scrolling down to the relevant questions. So we say the next questions ask about experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable, intimidated, offended, unsafe, or unwelcome. Just to be clear, we're asking about some things that, and so the questions will ask you about what happened, where and when the experiences happened, and if the person who did the unwanted behavior is someone you were in a relationship with or connected to the school. So I think, Martina, that's what you were referring to.
Well, a little bit of that, and a little bit also just thinking about this particular feedback that is about them switching back and forth in their mind between different forms of violence that they've experienced, or that sort of sequencing that we're talking about. I wonder if we couldn't add something in that, when we get to the, how many times did this happen, et cetera, if we can't have some stem there that's like, remember, these are about, these will be about times that somebody, made comments, etc. Other forms of violence will be addressed later, or other experiences will be. It's just like something that cues them, because like Kelly was saying, if they're thinking like, oh, I want to address all of these things that happen right now because they don't know that they're going to have that opportunity in the future. Maybe we can just cue them that they'll have another opportunity for the next type of horrible thing that happened to them.
Okay. All right. So just to kind of let you know how this would flow, they will see this introductory text here, and then they see the question. So since you enrolled at school, the question comes up next. Has anyone done any of the following things? And then we ask about specific things. And then they go to the next page, because that's a skip pattern, right? And the next page says, and if none of those things happened, if it says, none of these things happened, then they go to the next question, which would be, since you enrolled at school, has someone done these things to you? Okay. So if they say, yes, someone did one of those terrible things to me, how many times did it happen? They see that question, the responses. So that first they see how altogether, how many times did this things happen? And we'll come back to the numbering on that. But and if they say it happened once, then we give them questions that are formatted for it happened once. And so how many times did these things happen? When did this experience happen? Where did it happen? And then who was the person associated with the school or not? If it was associated, then they see the role of the person at the school. And then if it's 2 or more times, we say, okay, about when did it first happen? And then when did it last happen? And then we ask, okay, so please think about the one that was the most serious or that had the biggest impact on you. And then, because we don't want to ask, okay, so you said, it happened to you 17 times, we can't really ask for that. So we want to know this information, but we're trying to limit the cognitive burden that we're putting on people who have to reply to it. So we're saying, please think about the one that you think that had the biggest impact on you or that you think was most serious. And then we ask those questions. So they're still only answering about the one incident that they felt was the most serious, although they're letting us know that this happened more than once, and we're asking them for a date range. One of the concerns that some folks had was, and I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. I don't have any way in SurveyMonkey of breaking up the text in that introductory block. So there's no way to put white space in the page that I can figure out. There might be, but I just can't. So you get that big text block there. And I'm afraid if we add anything to that, it's just going to make it harder for people to read and get through. And so I get what you're saying, Martina, but I think if they're getting a survey, I mean, I'm not sure how to say, we're going to ask you about a whole bunch of terrible things, but we're going to only ask you about them one at a time. I mean, we could put that somewhere in the consent page, the opening page, if you felt that was valuable.
Do you know about how many times we got that feedback about the sort of confusion about the sequencing or wanting to say all of the bad things and then answer? Was it just one person or was it multiple folks?
It was just one person.
If I have some things to add. So I opened up the survey while we were talking, and I think I know what that person was talking about. So is there any way that we can, and I'm so sorry if I missed it, can we share the survey? Do a screen share? Because I think it'll be easier to describe where I think we could just do a slightly different layout that would help with that confusion.
Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can.
And if I can screen share mine, I'm happy to do that too, since I've already gone through the demographic questions.
Can you screen share? Are you able to?
Yeah. I am. Can I go ahead and share it?
Yeah, do it.
Oops, I opened the wrong thing though. Share this. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing it now. This is that first page.
I'm not seeing it. Hang on.
Oh, what?
Hang on. Maybe it's just me.
I see it.
I see it.
Okay.
Wonderful. So this is that first page when we're starting to get into the experiences, right? And it says the next questions asked about experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable. The questions you will be asked is what happened, where and when the experience or experiences happened, if the person, and so forth, right? So it says that that's what you're going to be asked. Then if you respond, then it asks, you take it to the next one, and it says, now we will ask you more questions. I think that might be one of those confusions. Whereas if we start slower in the beginning, like we're going to ask some questions on the following pages that include the following, but we're going to start with such. The next page will ask about who did it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be my only suggestion, because it feels like when we go to the next page, it feels like we didn't answer all the previous questions, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, so we're going to ask you about terrible things. And then later we'll ask, and after we ask you about the terrible things, then we'll ask you, can you give me some language or
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was thinking something like, and I might need to share my screen, or I can just look at it, I guess. Something like the next questions ask about experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable, intimidated. So start the same way. Our first question will be about the type of harm you experienced. Afterwards, we're going to ask on the next pages, we'll ask the following. Where and when the experience or experiences happened, if the person or people who did the unwanted behavior is someone you're in a relationship with. So and then when they go to the next page, it says, we would say, okay, now we're going to ask more about, so now is the opportunity to, or I don't think we need to start with now, but altogether, how many times? Or based on what you answered in the last question, how many times? I think we just need some reference points because it does change pages. So referencing back and forth, I think, would be helpful.
I think that's a really good idea. I agree with Caroline. I just have one small question about the logic of the survey here. For example, like Caroline chose two options, like two different kinds of terrible things happened. And when we jump to the next page, is there a very clear indication of saying that we're only calculating one kind of violence that you selected, or we're calculating all the time of the violence that happened that you selected?
Can you go back and show that again, please? That's incredibly helpful, I think. And Vinny, I see your hand too.
Okay. So just for making sure we're on the same, we're starting. So this is the start one, and I selected two of them. Next goes to, now we'll ask for some information about the experiences. Please remember that you can skip. So altogether, how many times did these things happen? I said two. And then it would say about did the first experience happen? When did the last experience happen? And then where?
So
yeah, that's why I was going to say that's where I was confused about, because the questions were not on the same page and it was referencing things, and I was kind of just wishing something would be piped in to the next question. I didn't know whether it had that feature, because I was like, okay, what are we talking about? So yeah, and the flow.
So we're
Yeah, I have a suggestion.
So we're
Sorry, you can go.
trying to capture all the violence, or just one kind of violence, and there will be other like follow-up question about another kind, or just all of them at once.
So, can you go back, Caroline? And back one more. Okay. So if you said that any of these things happened, made comments, asked me to do something sexual, touched non-sexual parts of my body, any of those things would meet the definition of sexual harassment. Okay, so we're defining, so anybody who says one or more of this kind of terrible thing happened to me, we would say, okay, in our analysis, we would say this person said that they had experienced multiple incidences of sexual harassment.
Got you. So this page was capturing sexual harassment, and sexual assault has its own later page, the whole section. Okay, that makes sense.
I do think that highlights, though, that if we can get confused and we put it together, that is where folks who have never seen it before are likely to get confused, right? So that's the challenge.
Vinny, you were next, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, would it be too much to add a page beforehand with the questions in this series? Like, hey, this is going to ask about your sexual assault experience. This is what 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 will ask you if applicable. And then you can roll right into that. And if they're not, you'll just skip through them. And then for the next questions in the series, maybe do the same so that people can like start preparing their answers.
We are trying to be really careful not to prime them by using words like sexual assault, sexual harassment. When we talk about, sorry, Caroline, can you go back a page? I think maybe to the beginning. Or no, so hang on, let me go, that won't work. Can you stop sharing for a second? I'll bring up the other one. Because otherwise you're going to have to go through like stupid amount of pages. And that's the other thing about SurveyMonkey is it doesn't let you jump around really easily between sections. There's no really good internal navigation. Okay. So at the very beginning, let's see, where's our introductory language? We tell them that we are going to be using the term sexual misconduct to describe unwanted behaviors that have to do with sex, sexuality, gender, and relationships. That's as specific as we get in talking about those kinds of, we don't want to use the word sexual assault because sometimes people are like, well, he didn't really sexually assault me. He just made me have sex when I didn't want to, right? Because using that word can be so hard for folks. Yeah, and Lisa, I'm seeing your hand too.
I just agree that the questions that follow the list of different kinds of experiences, if I experienced one in my first year and one in my fourth year, and both were terrible, I wouldn't know what to, both were, I'll say, equally terribly impactful. I wouldn't know what the following questions were about necessarily. Which of those two experiences were they asking me about? Or if I experienced like 4 of one type and 2 of another type, or, worst case, like then I would wonder which of those 4 type things.
Yeah, we're forcing a choice here. And we're forcing that choice really deliberately to limit the amount of data that someone is required to provide for us. We could add something, we can certainly add like, is there any other information that you want to give us about these experiences? We could add another question like that if you felt like that would be helpful or valuable to survivors.
I just think that the part that has the 4 follow-up questions, which is on the other version, was easier to see. It wasn't clear which of the 4 you should be answering about. So any kind of signposting or roadmap would help.
So please think about the experience that was most serious or that had the biggest impact on you. That's what we're asking. I think it was
before that. Wasn't there something before that?
No, I don't think so. Okay. We're asking, did any of these terrible things happen to you? How many times did the terrible things happen?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, number 17. Altogether, how many times did these things happen? So, and when did the experience happen? So
that's if it happened once, then you get these then 3 it's just questions. Okay. Yeah, then you get these questions. If it happened more than once, then you get this second set of questions. You don't get all of those questions all together. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
These things. It's the word these that makes it help. The word these helps.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe even adding like these, I don't know, if they pick multiple, can it be these various things or something to make it clear that we're asking you about all the things instead of just one of them at a time.
Now we will ask for some information about the experiences. Altogether, how many times did these things happen?
I think that works fine.
Okay. All right.
Lisa, am I understanding that like part of what you're pointing out is that having them select from a few types of like what we would call like sexual harassment or whatever, like sort of categorizing it, like there's saying things and then whatever the other option was, and Carolyn chose 2, that they might be thinking of those 2 separately and we're thinking of them as all part of one type of violence, and that might be the disconnect?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. If one thing happened when I was in my first year and then another thing happened in my 4th year, I think the word
So
these
then-
is fine. It just wasn't clear at first for me.
Yeah. So
The
I think
alternative-
that's the, oh, sorry. You go ahead, Rose.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Martina.
I was just gonna say, I think that's the complexity, right? Is that we want them to drill down a little bit on what type of sexual harassment, for example, they experienced, but then we want them to answer the rest of those questions broadly about that whole category of sexual harassment, not about, choice A and choice D separately. And I think that is kind of a forced choice for them, but I'm not sure if there's another way to have the like SurveyMonkey articulate those things if we want them to drill down on those more specific responses there to 16.
What we could do would be, since you enrolled at school, has someone made comments either out loud or in writing about sex, sexuality, or sexual body parts, and then a set of follow-up questions. And then since you enrolled at school, has someone asked you to do something sexual with them, and then the set of follow-up questions. But you see the problem there, right? Is that what we would do would be, we would be exponentially increasing the number of questions that we would be requiring people to answer. And we had agreed that we didn't want to do that. We had agreed that we wanted to, rather than have an individual, because I mean, methodologically, the best way is to say, did this particular bad thing happen to you? How many times? When? Who did it? Where did it happen? Okay, now what about this terrible thing? But instead, we sort of group the terrible things by the kind of thing that they are, right? So we have sexual harassment, we have gender-based harassment, we have sexual orientation harassment. And we have different questions for all of that. This is that pivot point where we have to, think about what can we reasonably ask a student to do, and what would be the best way to ask those questions, right? Martina? Yeah.
I'm wondering within SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics if there's a way to populate those responses so that it says, like, say we select made comments and touched as the two. Is there a way to have it say, now we will ask, or something like, you indicated that somebody had populate up made comments, somebody had touched. Now we'll ask for some more information about those experiences so that they're being reminded that you selected those two things, but we're talking about that whole category of experience, if you will, so that they're not thinking that we're doing those in two different entire sets. I don't even know if that's possible within the SurveyMonkey thing.
I know it's not possible in SurveyMonkey. I'm not sure about Qualtrics. Hi, Jimmy.
I was going to say it is possible in Qualtrics. I mean, Qualtrics is just a much more powerful tool. And so I think if I'm thinking about my institution, if we have freedom, I think we would probably pipe it a little differently so that it would populate exactly what the student is answering about based on what the previous response was. It is very complex logic, but it is possible.
Yeah.
Not in SurveyMonkey, but in
right.
Qualtrics.
And just a reminder, when we surveyed the institutions, about half of them, the ones that responded, and about 22 out of the 60 or so responded. And about 10 or 11 of them said, yes, we use Qualtrics. And the other 10 or 11 said, we use, about half of them use SurveyMonkey, and then the other half just use Google Forms or Teams. So, or Forms. I don't want to just hand a Word doc to people and say, here, put it into your program, right? Like, think about all of the errors and all of the additional work. I'm hoping that what we can do is either provide them with the Qualtrics package or the SurveyMonkey package and say, here, we want you to do this survey. Those folks that have Qualtrics can do things to make the survey different. As long as they're not, as long as they're asking all of the questions, but they can't ask any new questions unless they ask us if they can add them, right? The folks who don't have SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics are probably going to need to purchase SurveyMonkey right? Which is about $300 for an educational license per year. So that's a burden on them, but it's, at least they have that. Just honestly, I think what's probably going to end up happening is somebody like Grand River Solutions is going to come in and say, we will run the whole thing for you. And they'll probably, run it through Qualtrics. So there's some refinement that we can do, but the other thing is, how much different do we want it to look in Qualtrics than in SurveyMonkey? If we're asking the questions in different ways in Qualtrics because we have more flexibility and we can be more precise, we're going to get a different kind of response than we're going to get to the SurveyMonkey survey, right? And so that's something to think about. If we want to be able to say we are, everybody's doing the same survey, then we have to keep the logic the same. SurveyMonkey is going to be as far as we can go. We can't use all of the great features that Qualtrics has to make it look prettier. Does that make sense to folks? Yeah, it's not ideal.
Is this where we could just include an indicator that could be identical on both surveys? That is just that reminder, thinking back to how you respond in the last question, please consider those experiences when answering the following questions or something like that. Just a soft, and because that previous button works really well. So if someone wants to remember the language or something, they can go back.
So Caroline, would there be language that you would like? Now we will ask for some information about the experiences. Would you like to change that?
Yeah, I think we could just say something, and I think Martina said it as well. A couple people have said it, but just the idea of thinking back to your answers in the last question. Please respond to these. Based on, I'm getting wordy. It doesn't need to be that wordy.
Yeah.
Short and sweet, but the idea is just that indicator to remind people we're talking about those two previous things. Sorry, I said two because I responded to two, but whatever.
Yeah, if we can think of a way to do that and keep it in plain language, that would be great. And I think we had something that was originally more complex than now we will ask for some information about the experiences, but I think we changed it to that because that's more plain language. It's maybe a little easier for folks to understand. But if we're losing nuance and people aren't sure what experiences we're talking about, then we can certainly add a clarifying question or a clarifying statement.
And we can't use hyperlinks, you said, no?
We cannot use hyperlinks in SurveyMonkey, yeah.
Okay, then is there with the question itself, is there any kind of unique statement about it? Was it sexual experience? Maybe that was different than the other questions, so that you can just use that term with what you said in the previous statement about sexual experience or blah, 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 or whatever unique term that captured it, instead of defining it as sexual assault or whatever you said, whatever kind of unique term. Or do we have something like that?
Now we will ask for some information about the experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel. I mean, we could repeat the language that we ask. The next questions ask about experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable, intimidated, offended. They say, did these things happen? And then we could say, now we will ask for some information about the experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable, intimidated, offended. We could repeat that language if you felt that was helpful. I'm not sure that it's, if you feel it's helpful and it makes it more clear what we're asking about, we can certainly add that.
I would say yes. I would say yes. And maybe, and there's no way to get that's all in the same page or anything like that, or that would be too messy and too much.
From 16, we have to go to a different page because the skip logic requires that with the version that we have, the cheap version, You have to, you can't, you have to skip, if you want to have skip logic, you have to create a page break. So instead of the experiences, we could put, now we will ask for some information about, okay, does that, and we could probably just cut that.
I wish there was like a bold word that could capture it, like experiences, and then talk about what I'm talking about when I say experiences, and then use that same bold word. So it'll be easily translated. Or yeah.
Adea, I just made a change. I know you're on the phone, I think, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm wondering, so folks who can see the screen, I just changed the experiences to the experiences related to sex and gender that made you feel uncomfortable, intimidated, offended, and safe, unwelcome. Does that help, or is that too wordy and repetitive?
When I was thinking of repetitive, I was thinking of not the words in the survey itself. It was the order, how things were going, instead of asking about all the experiences. And then I was thinking of more like how you would do it in a Qualtrics, and piping it in for next block of questions would be like how long, I mean, how many times, and then the next block of questions would be who, or something like that. So since you can't do it that way, when I was thinking about repetitive, I was thinking you were talking about the experience, then the other two things that were coming afterwards, you kind of saw what was going on, and it got to be a little bit repetitive in terms of that. That's what I was thinking about when I was thinking repetitive.
I think what Martina said in the chat is like probably a really good middle ground. Now we will ask for more information about the times that someone made you feel uncomfortable, offended, unsafe, or unwelcome. I think it's slightly shorter and it's more specific that we are asking about, because you selected that these happened. So now we're asking about these scenarios. I think that would probably make things more clear to folks when they fill out the survey.
Well, just anything that connects it back to that question, since we can't type it in, something that will jog you to know, hey, I just answered this.
Okay, so I'm going to show you what that does. Hang on, I'm sorry, the mouse on this thing is really icky. Martina, I saw that you just put something in, but I can't really see the chat while I'm doing this. So hang on, let me get this.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to make it even simpler language, something like something even as simple as now we'll ask for more information about the experiences you indicated in the last question.
Okay, so it could be now we will ask for some information about the times that someone made you feel uncomfortable, offended, unsafe, or unwelcome. Or it could be now we will ask for some information about the experiences. That's not going to help. Sorry. Sorry about, Martina, can you read that again, please?
Yeah, the experiences you indicated in the last question, or something like that. I'm remembering back to one 20 minutes ago, whatever it is, when we started talking about this, that the whole point here is we were trying to find those sort of like sign points and references so that they know that now I'm answering about those things that I was just that I just indicated. So I think simple is probably best, because we did just like talk ourselves down a rabbit hole for like 20 minutes trying to make it both clear and also concise. And so maybe really just like doing the simplest as possible, especially since Carolyn said that the back and forth buttons really are working very well. So just so they remember, yeah, I could go back if I forgot, but I'm only talking about those kinds of experiences here.
So now we will ask for some information about the experiences you indicated in the last question. How do people feel about that language?
A lot of people has given it a thumbs up in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And
Okay, great.
It also solves my earlier confusion because it's like just a little bit more than these.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, we will go through that. All right, let me get to the others. Will go through faster, I think, because I think a lot of them were sort of based around, oops, sorry, the wrong one.
Quick question, Rome, before you move on.
Yeah,
And I apologize.
yeah.
I know that one of the points of confusion that I felt was that that question started with like, we're going to ask you the following things. And then they asked one question and then it said, now we're going to ask more. So it almost felt like we skipped. We know that we didn't skip asking questions, but from a viewer, I could see how it might feel that way. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'm not sure if no one else feels that way, then it's just my lens. But in case, if it is a concern, that we would just want to make sure we wordsmith that as well.
I think Martina brought that up earlier. We had talked about changing that introductory paragraph so that it says we're going to ask about these things. The first question is going to ask about the kind of harm you might have experienced, and then we will ask on the next page we will ask about how many times this thing happened, and then we will ask you about who, what, where.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the draft survey feedback again. Let's see. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to try and get this a little bigger. Here we go. All right, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger without blowing it out too much. Okay. Okay, so we've got that. All right, now on to the next one. Right, somebody said, why are we saying not applicable and prefer not to answer? We have to. The statute requires that we say not applicable and decline to state. And we changed the language of decline to state to prefer not to answer. Again, can't see any of you, can't see the chat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next question, if 16 and 17, and I wasn't sure which ones they were talking about because you see different questions, they're numbered differently depending on how you answer the questions, right? So folks who haven't had the experience, and I think this is sort of referring to that thing that we just talked about with Caroline and Martina, where the next set of questions as a page unto itself is then going to the next set of questions. So I think that's what they meant. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. I think what they're saying is, I want that language that says you're going to ask me about this question, and then on the next pages we're going to ask you about this stuff. I think that's what that comment means. Introduce the concept of rain before referring to it. We actually do talk about rain. Let me see if I can read the language that we use to talk about rain. So on the introductory page, when people come into the survey, some of the language that's there, oh, it's not here. And I'm sorry, Caroline, you've got the survey open. I don't have that language. Can you go to the first page of the survey and read the language about rain on that, or share the screen? I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll share in just a moment. Let me just go back to the first page so you all don't have to watch me scroll.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Hey, Rowan, when I was when I think like in research, when you introduce a topic, like let's say an acronym or whatever, you always introduce the word or describe it and then start using it. So when you're introducing RAIN on the first page, the link to it doesn't have to be on the first page, but on the subsequent pages after you've introduced the concept.
Okay. So on every page we have a banner on, because I can't do a link on SurveyMonkey. Every page has a banner that says, if you want help now, and then it's got the URL, the rain.org.
So you can't just do it for the subsequent pages. You have to do it for every page. So that's a limitation.
Well, we want to have the resources available on every page. We
Okay.
want them to always have access to the exit button, which we can have, although we can't make it bigger, unfortunately. And then we also want them to always be seeing the RAIN link.
Then that was a comment by me when I took it, and because I was like, because when I first saw it, I was like, okay, what is this? What is this? Because I saw it at front, and then I read it, and I was like, well, yeah, it's just a small thing. So you can ignore that comment then.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make
Okay,
it
thank you.
will continue to help too. Can everyone see that okay? Is it large enough?
Yes.
Okay, I can get a little bit bigger.
So there's the language. And again, sorry, I can't do white space here, but we recognize that participating in the pilot may be difficult for some people for many reasons. We encourage anyone who may be affected to, and that should be, use their local confidential advocacy center or RAIN, which is, and then I didn't spell out the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. I can do that if that would be helpful to folks think. Okay.
No, well, not.
Rowan, can I make one very quick observation? Doesn't need any
Yeah.
discussion, but in my experience with SurveyMonkey, and I noticed this when I opened this up a few days ago, like maybe we should indent each of the paragraphs with a tab, because you may think that you're double returning and you get a space there. You don't always, and if somebody gets the copy of it, and then I really don't understand how it appears differently, but if you were to tab indent each new paragraph, that would at least solve the problem of them kind of, a paragraph ending, but it's not really visually clear there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I think that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, images, and I mean, not images, but bolding and separation and things like that. More readability.
Jimmy, did I see your hand?
You did. It's only because I have to pop off, and I just had a question around SurveyMonkey and collecting IP addresses. With the cheap version, I'm nervous about the potential of, like, if we go through this IRB process with University of Oregon, it's highly sensitive data. So I don't know that answer, and so I just wanted to put it out there before I head out about
We can turn it off. We can turn off collection
because it remembered
addresses.
me when I went back in, and so I was figuring it was connecting like the dots of who I was.
Okay. I thought I had turned that off, but yeah, that's interesting that it's doing that. I will double check and make sure that it's turned off, but thanks for letting me know that.
It did the same thing for me, Rowan, too. It remembered my answers from last time when I popped into it today.
Okay. All right, that's
Rowan,
something to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, to close the loop on the RAIN thing, whether or not we spell out what RAIN stands for in that first, I'm not sure. I have strong feelings one way or another, but I just did want everyone to know that when a person calls RAIN, it automatically connects them. If they call the RAIN crisis line, it automatically connects them to their local agency based on their area code. So we, like SAS, we get calls that are ported through RAIN all the time, and there's like no, the user has no idea that they're doing that. So it really is a resource that is going to connect people to their local agency. So I really do think it's the appropriate one to be giving them.
It's also got that web chat feature, which is awesome because you can do a WhatsApp chat or you can do a web-based chat on that. Lena, are you here with us? Lena, I had sent out there's a list of all of the local crisis advocacy services, and I think the campus-based ones that's on the Sexual Assault Task Force website. And I was wondering if we could link to that, because that is that's a really useful resource. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull. Let's see if I can pull it up. But I didn't want to do that without your permission.
Yeah, can you all hear me okay? I have issues with Teams, just want to make sure. That sounds great to me. I'll double check with Shannon just, for good measure, but that sounds wonderful to me. I'll take a look at the list as well. If it needs any updating, I will do that and let you know.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I can share. Yeah, I'm going to share what this looks like with you all. So when you go to this is the Help for Survivors by County. And so it's got really important information about tech safety. Are you a college student? You can go to the campus website, which is also in the campus reporting options. This is an incredibly useful website. So yeah, so I just really like that resource, and I was hoping that we could use that. If we just use the one by county, I think that one will link people to the campus if they want it or not. And I'm seeing we have 5 minutes left in our meeting. Oh my God. Okay. Y'all. All right, here we go. We're going to race through this, right? Okay. So SurveyMonkey doesn't allow for white space, but the indent will help. That's a really great idea. And then count. So we say, how many times did this happen? And we say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more. Do we want to just, since we're only going to ask them about, since we're breaking it up to, it didn't happen, it happened once, it happened 2 or more times, should we just make the responses be 0, 1, 2 or more times?
Rowan, could you remind us what was the original options that we had? I thought that's what we had.
Originally, it says, how many times did this bad thing happen? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more.
I still think maybe collecting the data about the exact time that it happened is like very important, because like a repeated kind of violence, like that repeated like 7 times, is like different from something that only happened like 2 times. I think that might be some valuable data that we want to keep. And I honestly don't think asking them like from 0 to 2 or from 0 to 10 is like too much of a cognitive like load or burden for folks.
I think it's more like, can I remember if it was 7 or 8 times? And I have to think about every single time it happened. I could think, yeah, it happened. I know it happened more than once, but otherwise I have to add up. Let's see, there was that one time in freshman year, and then again in my sophomore year. But wait a minute, that was when I was at home. So I think it was partly that. And then honestly, it's partly just because 0 through 10 takes up so much space on the survey page, right? So it makes the survey a lot longer. But I am totally fine keeping it the way it is if people want to do that.
I'll pop in to say that I think no times, 1 times, or multiple times, so 0, 1, or 2 plus, is sufficient, in part because a lot of the things we're describing are things that take place in a kind of like, what is 1 time of economic abuse? Right? Like, these are often things that are happening over long term, especially when we're talking about relational violence. I think separating them into discrete like incidences sort of muddies things a little. So did it happen no time? Was it a single unique experience, or was it something that happened multiple times? Seems to me to be totally sufficient.
What I would add to this conversation, being at a community college, we have a higher number of students who've experienced trauma overall. And for our college, I think this is where it could be really helpful for the conversation as we're continuing to educate around trauma-informed response, that when they learn that a certain percentage of our students have had repeated experiences of violence, That is just our selling point from that lens of what we take from the survey for education. That can be a tool we can use at our college for that continued education. That being said, I do think we could change the numbering to 0 times, 1 times, a few times, between 1 and 3, or many times if we wanted to shift it. Because I hear all the like responses as far as what are we going to get from this? How is this going to be impactful? I will just note that when the folks who are looking at this, if they don't understand gender-based violence or relationship abuse, they might look at this as a one-time incident versus understanding that financial abuse, Martina, as you said, is an ongoing thing. So it's helping to educate the folks who don't get it, and then helping understand why trauma-informed response, for example, is beneficial.
So yeah, we could break it up in other ways too. I think the reason 0, 1, 2 or more is because when we're asking for follow-up questions, remember, we're only asking about the one time. The other thing to think about is how we're going to aggregate this information, right? Because if we have it broken out into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we might have a cell that we're gonna end up combining, right? Because we're gonna end up combining all of the people who said that it happened 5 through 8 times, because if it's a smaller school, that's going to be a small cell. And we can't do analysis with, when it's below our minimum threshold on cell size, which we haven't decided yet. I hope that made sense. So, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 3 people said it happened 7 times, and 4 people said it happened 8 times, we're going to have to combine those to get a cell size that we can analyze. The reason that we did it 0 to 10 in the first place was because that was based on feedback from the Mary Koss's SESV, the Sexual Experiences Survey, where they found that if you said 1, 2 to 4 times, 5 or more times, people felt like there was a normal number of times that I know that's messed up, right? But people felt like there was a normal number of times that it should be happening, and that they might be the outlier. But I'm not sure how accurate that would be for our purposes. So that's just why we had it that way originally. Those are just some considerations.
I have a hard stop at 1, so I have to run. But Rowan, I totally agree. I think it should be 0 once and multiple times, or something like that. It makes it so much easier for people to think about it as well, right? Several times I've talked about how much mental energy it takes to answer a question. If you're trying to figure out whether something was 3 times or 4 times, and you spend any time doing that, that's just one more little drop of energy that we've lost, that we may want them to have further down the survey. So the combination of what you're saying, Rowan, we're definitely anybody's going to collapse the categories for analysis. They have to. And B, it just makes it easier to answer. I think makes it a pretty compelling case to go with 0, 1 and 2 or more, or 0, 1 and more than 1, or something like that.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hey, bye,
Thank
everyone.
you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Bye. Okay, folks, where are we at with that? Did it stop sharing? No, not yet. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so we can get clarity on that. Okay, how are we feeling about that? 0, 1, many, or 0, 1, 2 to 4, 2 to 5?
I think I sort of agree with Martina that the language could be never happened. One incident happened, multiple incident happened. Yeah, and I also see like how like if we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 options for data analysis, it could be like there's just no enough sample to do the single analysis for that group of people.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think that keeping them from having to count, right? That's a good thing. And then, but we still get the same kind of data. And then it also, in my head, kind of alleviates a little bit of that confusion of which incident am I talking about? Number 2, number 4, right? Instead, I'm just talking about the many times after. That was my response, right? That more than once. So now I can just think of all of it as one more than once, right? So I liked that idea.
I just want to acknowledge it is after 1. If anybody else has to leave, that thank you so much for being here at all, right? Okay, so going down, could we distinguish? So someone was saying, all right, so when we're asking in those follow-up questions, when you've had multiple experiences, thinking about the experience that was most serious or had the biggest impact on you, and then bolding this part was the person or people who harmed you or made you uncomfortable, someone you were in a romantic or intimate relationship with. I think that would work. If that doesn't work for folks, let me know. But if that's okay, I think that makes a lot of sense to have the thinking about you not as bold as the actual question itself. It helps a little bit to clarify what we're actually asking. And then this one, okay, somebody said non-faculty, staff person, and it was meant to be read as non-faculty staff person. But we could just write staff person if people think that that's clear enough.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I think we, yeah. Sorry, writing a note to myself. Okay, and then this is that back to that, what these things happened and all that stuff. We already talked about that pretty much. What does not applicable mean on the are you a transgender? Again, we have to have not applicable and decline to state. And for what is your sex? Are you looking for natal sex, current sex characteristics? We are not looking to define what people mean by sex at all. We want them to respond in the way that makes sense to them. So however they answer is the answer that makes sense. We're not going to say, you know, yeah, especially right now, the last thing in the world I want to do is ask somebody to tell me what they were assigned at birth. Okay, and if anybody has any comments about that, happy to have a discussion. Allow them, yes, and the multiple sexuality options, changed that, and then also changed, has your institution ever shared any of the following? And that's about the education. Got that, thank you for catching that. The questions for citizen, this one confused me because they asked, the instruction for citizenship question should follow the same wording as the sexual orientation question for consistency. Which, and by the way, I just changed it to anonymous because we can make it anonymous throughout the survey. So this is what the instructions say, and it's pretty much the same. So I'm not sure if there was something else that people wanted me to change. Maybe you can send me a note if you're the person and you're like, no, Rowan, you're missing the point.
I'm the one who wrote this. Okay. I would say that it's purely because I feel like it would make people feel confused about, okay, so what's the difference between confidential and anonymous? Like, and what's the difference between privacy, confidential, and anonymous? So I also, like, just for the pure sake of like decreasing the cognitive like requirement of reading the whole thing, if they look exactly the same, then like it would make people feel like, okay, like I don't need to rethink about the meaning of every word in this paragraph again. Yeah, that's my whole point. And I'm perfectly happy about just like say anonymous.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I think we've got anonymous all the way through there. Yeah, again, we can't click on that. So the explanation about why the survey avoids terms like abuser or perpetrator only needs to appear once. And so just a reminder that you're only going to see those things that apply to you. So if we put it at the beginning and said that we're going to avoid using this term, I'm afraid that when people get to like the sexual violence question, then when we say the person who had sex with you without permission, they're like, what do you mean, my rapist? Like, why are you being so coy here? And so having that explanation was intended to make the survey more trauma informed. Hopefully that makes sense for folks.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think it might because in order to test the survey, I chose positive every time, and that's the reason I found it pretty redundant.
Yeah,
I literally went through everyone I could possibly like pop to the screen.
I'm sure that'll happen for some folks, and I hope it won't happen very often. But yeah, okay. And then this, I wasn't sure which question, but if the question was, since you were enrolled at school as someone you were in a relationship, done these things, the options included, yes. Okay, so the reason that, let me see if I can pull it up in the survey and show folks what they're talking about here. Okay. All right.
Rowan, do you want me to go to that page? Since I have it up. Are you going to do the Word doc?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can get to, I'm so sorry. This is really awkward. Okay, here we go. Sorry to doing that. Okay, my technical problems should not be your issues as well. Okay, so 81. Okay. So if they were asking about the question, so this is the question, and this is the question that asks about things that happen that meet the definition of relationship violence. I'm not sure why that one is bolded there, but it's not in the survey. So anyhow, so if any of those things happen, then you get these questions, and they get the question about who, and it's the same as in the previous ones, but because we already asked them, we asked about experiences that you had when you were in a relationship with someone. Were you in, and then since you were at school, has anyone you were in a relationship with done any of the following things? And then the responses for who are, what were they, someone you were in a romantic or intimate relationship with? So this is what feels redundant to folks, is that no, we already asked you, you already answered the question based on the fact that you were in a romantic relationship with them. Yeah. So I think that makes sense, but I think it would be helpful to maybe eliminate no, but then keep we were in a relationship when it happened, the relationship that ended when it happened, and then still continue to offer that unsure, don't know, not applicable, prefer to answer.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay. I think it would be very valuable to at least like being able to distinguish whether they're still in a relationship or the breakup has already happened.
We'll change that. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in if you all don't mind. One of the values of the no is that for students who are experiencing family violence, or if it's a roommate who's doing it, and we see a decent amount of that at PCC, particularly family violence. Now, that might not be what this survey wants to find information about. If that's not what we're trying to learn more about, then we can remove it. But I just the no can be valuable. It might just be reframing the initial question a little bit as far as if they are in an intimate relationship with them or not. Does that make sense?
Because we're specifically asking about intimate partner violence there. We're not asking about family violence or roommate violence.
Yeah, that's the only, and that's fine.
So, yeah, but I could see where people might want to talk about those other forms of violence too. But I think for our purposes, we kind of want to limit it to the intimate partner. Because that's our mandate, right? That's our world. Okay. Go ahead and share this again. So I'll go through and change that. And then I can bold the questions. So I will go through and try and do that and try and make it helpful. And then this person said, So, and then down here, yes, this I thought was a really good point. Somebody said we're in the race and ethnicity categories. We ask things like, do you identify as Native American, Indigenous? And then we say, any of these things, and et cetera. And et cetera does feel really dismissive and objectifying to me. So I think maybe changing that to other might help. I don't know if respondent number 5 is here or not, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't see any harm of adding that option there.
All right, we'll change.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute, but yeah, I agree. I was the one who made the comment about etc.
And so would changing it to other feel less like object or less dismissive maybe, or
I
objectifying?
feel like it sounds less dismissive, but at the same time, there's just this whole conversation around othering people. So that comment is like kind of going through my mind now. So I'm trying to brainstorm something that might be like more all inclusive. But it's hard to think of something like on the spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just so you know,
Could
all
we
of
add
those,
not listed?
Yeah, good idea.
we could put not listed. Just so you know, the framing for that is from the Oregon Health Authority. They did tons and tons of work on their Real D Soji stuff. So I'm sure that's why they used et cetera, was to avoid that othering. But we could put not listed, and I think that would be fine. It's a great suggestion. Okay. Okay, so this is where we got stuck with the all right, so on this one, there's a new question that comes in at the end where we are, I'm going to stop sharing. We want to, when we've asked them about all the terrible things, you've been asked about all the terrible things, and you've said that at least one of those terrible things happened to you. Now we're going to ask, did you report terrible things to anybody? Did you talk about it to anybody? And what were the impacts that those terrible things had on you? With SurveyMonkey, there's no way to, I think Qualtrics used the term piping. With Qualtrics, we can pipe people directly into those sections and have them avoid those sections if they said, no terrible things happened to me. Okay. But for SurveyMonkey, the only way that we can get them to the questions about reporting and impact are to ask, did you say any of those terrible things that happened to you? So that's why we had to add that question there. So I'm not happy with it, but there's not a different solution unless we go to the $3,000 version of SurveyMonkey, which we're not going to do. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. And then let's see. Going back to. I think there's just one more thing here, folks. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for this really excellent question. I'm going to go ahead and go to 128 and 129. So, and then come back here. So the questions are asking, did you make a formal report to someone at the school, ask for an investigation, or otherwise ask them to document the misconduct you experienced? And then we ask, if that happened, were you given the following information about your rights and options? And the person is asking, do we only want to know if they got information about their rights and options if they made a formal report? Or do we want to know, did anybody give you the following information about your rights and options? What do people want to know?
I would want to know if they gave like any report, because I give any reporter their rights and responsibilities sheet. Like, so it doesn't matter if they file a formal report, if they ask for an anonymous response, if they are just giving me an FYI, I still give them their rights and responsibilities form so that they know that they have other options and that they have the right to change their mind on that option, right? So if they've come to me and say, I would just want an anonymous response, but then 2 weeks later they say, you know what, I think I'm good with filing the formal report. They know they still have that right. And so I give it to every single person that files a report. So I don't know if that's everyone else's standard practice, but that's sort of mine.
So you're a Title IX coordinator, right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. So if you were, so this question, so probably that 128 is asking, did you make a report to somebody like a Title IX coordinator? And then did you get the following information about your rights and options? If we ask generally, did you get this information about your rights and options from anybody? It could be, did you go to an advocate? Did you go to your dorm supervisor? Did you ask a counselor at the school? And did they give you information about your rights and options? So I think that's what we want to know is did anybody get you did you get this information from anybody? Is that kind of what, but we don't necessarily need to know who they got it from. Is that correct? Martina, I think I see your hand, but I'm sorry, I can't see you all while I'm looking at the screen.
Sorry, yeah, it's awkward with
Yeah.
I guess my question is maybe for Jennifer, is and I'm just going to assume, would a Title IX coordinator be required to provide them with that information, regardless of whether, like you said, it's a formal report or just asking for information? Because if so,
I
that
think
would
the title,
be. Oh, sorry.
the regs say only for formal reports, they must be given when the notice goes out, but I give them to every individual.
I see. I see.
As far as like if they report to, so my only issue with like to anyone on campus, like that sort of the way that question gets worded is then it's like the assumption that if they told their professor and then their professor didn't give them the rights and responsibilities sheet, that somehow like is a negative reflection on the institution. But my professors may not have a rights and responsibility sheet. They don't even know. And so I guess that's just where I'm like, are we asking for, did they report to someone responsible for this stuff? Or did they just report to like their advisor or because those people are not trained in Title IX? Well, I mean, they are, but not to this extent, right? Like they're trained to tell them, go see the Title IX coordinator, right?
And this is where your perspective as a Title IX coordinator is about, are we doing everything that we're supposed to do in compliance because we're going to get in trouble if we don't? And what we really want to know is just, did the students get this information? We're not really concerned about, did you as a Title IX coordinator comply with the law? Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because everything like I said, I'm still just confused, or I'm still just worried that it will, right, that the perception that, I told my professor, but nobody told me about my rights.
Right, but we're not going to ask them specifically who, so we can do two things. We can say, did you make a formal report? If so, were you given the following information? Or we could say, did you make a formal report? And then a separate question, regardless of whether you made a formal report or not, were you given the following information about your rights and options? Without asking who it came from. And we could swap the order too, if that would make it feel less like we were asking about the Title IX coordinator situation, right? We could say, were you given the following information about your rights and options? And then, did you make a formal report to someone at the school? We could switch those if that would feel less targeting, I guess, the Title IX coordinators.
That makes sense to my mind. I was going to suggest maybe we switch them. Also because there's a very real possibility that folks taking this won't really know what it means to make a formal report versus, like Jennifer was saying, telling their advisor or somebody like that. That may feel formal, but like we know what we mean when we're saying formal. So switching the order of those, I think, decreases the likelihood that we have that like, if this, then that kind of a thinking of, did you make a formal report and then were you given, which could lead to that situation that Jennifer is referencing where like, sure, I told my RA and they didn't give me any sheet. And that makes the institution look bad when really it's not the responsibility of the RA. I don't actually know if that's an RA's responsibility.
Yeah, it's not the RA's responsibility. Right, right, yeah.
I was assuming, but I just realized as I said that
it depends on who the campus security authorities are, right? But yeah. So yeah, okay, we can switch them and then maybe that'll help because we really want to know what you're saying is what we really want to know is did they get it? Did anybody give them information about their rights and options? And then we also want to know, did you make a formal report or ask for an investigation or ask them to document the misconduct? Okay, so those are two separate questions. And so I think reversing the order makes it really clear that we're not asking, did you make a report? And then were you given the following information? Okay. And then the other thing that we could do would be combine 126, which I can't remember why it needs to be reworded, and 129. So did the person you told at your school give you information about the following rights and resources? Or we could, So we decided we didn't want to do this, but we could also just say, did the person you told at your school give you information about the following rights and resources? And that way, that might solve that problem. Let's see if I can find 126. Right. So 126 is, did the person you told at your school give you information about resources? And then it asks about resources like advocacy, crisis line, medical, stuff like that. If we change that to just, did the person you told at your school give you information about those resources and about your rights? And we could combine all of the rights and options with all of the resources and then ask people to select that. It makes the response list a lot longer, but it might make it a little easier. There's really no reason to split out the rights and options and the resources. And maybe I need to send that. I know what I'll do is I will type up a couple versions of that and send it out to you, because I'm not making much sense, and your brains are probably pretty full at this point since we've been meeting for an hour and a half. Okay. Sound good? Okay. All right. I will do that then. Okay. And then that's it. All right. So if you have any, so I will go ahead and make all of these changes. I will send it out to you to try and make it and try to explain what changes I made, so you don't have to look at the whole documents over and over again. And then hopefully get some feedback from folks. Would folks be able to give me feedback by the end of the day tomorrow? Because I'd really like to send this pilot out to the schools. We have not done that yet, and it's almost the middle of April. Okay, all right. So if you have a chance, I'll get it done this afternoon, send it out to you. If you get a chance to get me any other comments, or, here's a typo, you left a word out or something, if you could get that to me by the end of the day tomorrow, that's great. Just a reminder, this is a pilot that's going out to the schools. We've got plenty of time to make changes on this. So anything that we miss or anything that I miss, we can fix it.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rowan.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks, Rowan.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your